Hello, this is Greg Allison Green Griggs coming to you on the 29th of March, 22. Time on deck is 1900 hours Central Daylight Time. My friends, tonight I'll bring you special guest, a previous Assistant Secretary of the Army. And he also is a 30-year veteran of the Army, retired as a colonel. He had 10 years of nuclear weapons experience, and he's also served as the Army's chief economist and saw some combat in Iraq in 2004. And his name, he's running for Congress right now here in Alabama. And I'll bring him in here tonight, not because he's running for Congress, but because of I met him at a preppers meeting. He came and met with us at a preppers meeting that I was speaking at a couple of months ago called NARPNet, which meets in the Huntsville Library, good sized group. And he's actually going to be speaking, I think, here this next meeting. So, when a guy's running for Congress, he's got this kind of experience, and with everything going on today, and the things he said there at that meeting really impressed me. And I thought you guys would be interested in this one. So he has got the spirit that we've got. He's in tune with us, guys. This is the kind of people we need to put in office up there and get the bums in there and out. So I'm going to bring you more of this kind of stuff in the future. So please subscribe to my channel, bang the notification bell, and click all. Who brings you better guests than me? And also, guys, with everything going on right now, if you're not prepping, you need to wake up, because we're living in perilous times. I mean, heck, go buy a bag of beans, if nothing else, a bag of dried rice. But I do have a special right now with food that lasts 25 years. And you get, these days you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this right here is what it is. It's lightweight. It's freeze-dried. It's easy to bug out with. It's easy to store. This is actually 2 weeks worth of food in here, but it makes up 2,000 calories a day. Hard to believe, right? But that's what it is. But you get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Quite a lot of choices here. And right now, $150 off a 3-month supply, which is 6 of those buckets. Go to prepwithgreg.com. Prepwithgreg.com. Now we're going to get on here with a special guest. Again, Mr. Colonel, I should say, Colonel Casey Wardynski, previous Assistant Secretary of the Army. So, Colonel Wardynski, tell me, what is it that's keeping you awake right now? What is worrying you the most right this minute?
The people running our country, frankly.
I hear that. Well, look, we're sitting here on the potential precipice of World War III. Do you agree with that?
We're in a dangerous place. It could end up that way. We're in a situation now where a lot of third-party actors that nobody ever heard of, places like Chechnya, all the way to the Middle East, are involved in the Ukraine on both sides. You've got these nuclear reactors scattered across the country. You got the capability for these outfits to create a disaster that would span Europe, and consequences that would reach all the way to America. We've not seen a war like this where so many small actors have so much to say about what we're going to have to react to. And of course, the news media is driving the train with regard to the vision we get over this fight. I'm all for the Ukrainians. I think, the Russians should not have invaded. I'm happy to support Ukraine with materiel, but they're not going to be happy in the media until we've got our troops involved directly. And Putin's in a bad place. He's doing what he has to do because he's been stalled. He's, being pretty brutal with these cities. You're seeing cities like Mariupol getting leveled. That's tough for civilians to watch. You got a lot of words like war criminals being thrown around. Talking about bombing cities and women and children. All these sorts of things are very emotional topics that the media is throwing at us. With I think the objective of getting our forces involved, or NATO involved, with the risks that then come of direct contact between US or NATO forces and Russians. And frankly, the Russian army isn't that great. I said that at the beginning. I thought if Putin went for more than just a few of the border areas, he'd be in big trouble, and he's now in big trouble. And he would resort to, the weak man's tools, which are nuclear weapons. And so we hear about his nuclear weapons all the time because his army's not that great. We don't talk about him because our army is great and our other forces are great. And so a dangerous mix.
Unfortunately, he's got a plenitude of nuclear weapons. He's got a lot of them. He's got a lot more tactical nukes, thousands of those. Well, we got hundreds. And he's got a lot more strategic nuclear weapons that could attack us here than there. And I do believe from my discussions with Dr. Peter V Pry a week ago that he actually could conduct the first strike in the United States that could totally eliminate our ability to respond, especially if it includes electromagnetic pulse, high altitude electromagnetic pulse, that is, HEMP as we call it. So I think we're extremely vulnerable, and that could cause our foes to be very much tempted to do what we would have considered previously unthinkable. It's thinkable right now, and that's the sad state of our affair. A lot of people are chomping for a no-fly zone. You got guys like Graham out there, Senator Graham, calling for Putin's assassination, Biden kind of slipping up and saying things and backing them up constantly, like calling for Putin to be taken out. My experience is a leader like him is more concerned with staying in power than he is his own people. And I think that puts us in a threat. What do you think about a no-fly zone? I personally, I don't think we got any business being in there.
Well, if it's the U.S. forces involved in no-fly zone, you're essentially saying you're in combat, because no-fly means if they fly, they're going to get shot down, either by air defense systems or aircraft. We start shooting down Russian aircraft, that's a war.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else you call that other than the war. You know, I could see some kind of a scheme where, you know, you put something together like the Flying Tigers with volunteers and they fly out of sanctuary areas. I don't know if that would work very well, but the Russians did that to us in Korea. They'd fly out of Manchuria and Russia, and we wouldn't do anything about it until they got south of the Yalu. They'd do the same thing in Vietnam. We didn't do anything about it until they got south, typically, into the North Korean airspace. And so they've done that to us. Could Poland or, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania create a volunteer squadron to fly out of some NATO country and go against the Russians over Ukraine? I guess so. I'd be pretty leery of it being anything to do with America, though. But of course you could get American volunteers mixed in that mix, and that could get a little confusing for the Russians. So a big risk when we get into that sort of environment. And you've got Biden, who's now called for regime change and, the elimination of Putin, and called him a butcher and a war criminal. That doesn't leave Putin many places to go in terms of backing down.
Yeah, I think we need to leave Putin an exit.
That's right.
And we're not doing that. Any fantasy we might have of doing anything otherwise is probably just that. It's a fantasy and a dangerous one, considering the nuclear arsenal that's possessed by Russia. So, yes. We don't have a strategic interest. We may care about the people of Ukraine, but we don't have a strategic interest there. Why didn't we care about the peoples and various conflicts in Africa and other places through history? When we got to pick the ones that's, facing a nuclear adversary. We put our nose in too many things in the past in this country, is my opinion. What do you think?
I think the founding fathers warned us against that. I think Washington, in his farewell address, warned us against that. And I think Jefferson warned us against going overseas looking for foreign dragons to slay. When you get down to it, there's no end of, rotten people out there that probably need to die. But we don't have to be the ones involved in doing all of it. We need to pick the ones that matter to us. And
well, there you go. You said something, kid. We don't have to be the ones doing all of it. But what strikes me is we're supposedly over there in NATO defending Europe. Right. You look at the soldiers that's on the front line right now in those former Warsaw states and Poland and places like that. They just NATO fielded 140,000 soldiers. But what a lot of people don't understand is 100,000 of those are Americans. Europe's got a bigger population than us. Their collective GDP is higher than us. They're not a nation per se, but if you were to lump everything they're doing together, it would be better than what we've got. How come they're not putting the money in it? Well, I gotta, everybody criticized Trump for saying this, but I felt like this when I was a soldier in the Army. I've been ticked off about this for, way over 30 years, 40 years, going back to 78. So why is it that we are not, why is it that we're there? Why, and that kind of number? Why is it way more Americans than Europeans? And why are we putting so much more of our own money than the Europeans are? They need more skin in the game of defending themselves than us. Why? That don't strike me right. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's the point Trump made. early on. He pointed out that NATO needed to carry their weight, and particularly Germany. The NATO allies, I think, are supposed to spend at least 2% of gross domestic product on defense. And Germany was down around 1%. And Germany couldn't field a submarine that could go to sea. They couldn't field a fighter that could get in the air. And they're buying energy from Russia. And with that energy purchase, Russia has the money to modernize their military and engage in foreign adventures in Syria and so forth. It didn't make any sense to me, and it didn't make any sense to Trump. And that's why he got after NATO. And of course, here at home, the liberals got after Trump saying he wasn't for NATO. Well, he's not for freeloaders. You know, if it's not important enough for them to defend themselves, you got to ask a question: why is it our job?
Bingo, exactly. Thank you for that. I'm glad to hear a congressional candidate that's got some sense and a couple of brain cells between his ears. But you've also got the military, you know, maybe because we're both, you know, veterans. You know, we see things different when you've been in the service. You go, why are we putting our skin in the game and they're not?
Right.
The same skill. That just,
well, and of course, we got to deal with China. We're not going to see the Germans over dealing with China. We're not going to see we might see the British, and we might see the French. We're not going to see the Germans or the Dutch or any of these other countries. There's 30 of them in NATO now. And NATO had a chance to put Ukraine into NATO. The 30 countries all have to agree to do that. Germany was never going to agree to let Ukraine in NATO because they know what it meant to Russia, and they didn't want to annoy the Russians. So why do we treat Ukraine like it's part of NATO now when we made a purposeful decision not to put them in NATO? All of a sudden they're attacked.
That's the enigma. Why are we looking at a war over the proposition of putting a country in a treaty organization that they didn't have any chance of going in the first place?
Right.
It's crazy. Right. It's nuts. But anyway, so much for that. What do you feel that Putin's real objectives are?
I think he felt cornered, frankly. You know, there was a maiden revolution in 2014 under Obama in Ukraine, and it took a government out that had been friendly to Russia and put in a government that was friendly to NATO and wanted to join NATO and the EU. You saw one in Belarus after that tried to take out Lukashenko and put in a government that was more Western leaning. Then you saw Georgia, right? The Russians invaded Georgia to deal with Saakashvili down there. And then most recently, I think it was in the last 4 months, you saw a color revolution taking place in Kazakhstan, which is an allied country with Russia. And the Russians sent troops, as did Belarus, down there to quash that revolution. And, you know, the same cast of characters are usually mentioned in these things: Soros, Western interests. Hillary's probably lurking around somewhere in the background. Yeah, and Putin was probably like, we're under siege here. Enough is enough. And I'm going to take steps to make sure Ukraine doesn't join NATO.
Well, I definitely see that. And we got to at least give him credit. He warned us for a long time. He kept saying over and over and over,
the red line.
Things continue, we're going to have a war. And he kept saying, and then he started saying he expected to have a war with America, World War III. And I believe right now he sees this as a war with America. It may not be direct. He sees himself at war with us, the West.
Right.
And Ukraine just happens to be the way he's engaging it. But
I'm no apologist for this character. I mean, he's a tough guy, bad guy. But there's plenty of bad guys around the world. He happens to be one with a lot of nuclear weapons and a lot of energy. If somebody was mucking around in Grenada, we'd do something about it. In fact, we did. And if somebody was mucking around in Panama, we'd do something, and we did.
Yep.
Right. And if they were fooling around in Mexico, we'd take an interest. If Mexico made noises about forming an alliance with China, right, we'd do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think there's this thing called the Monroe Doctrine. Foreign powers stay out of the Western Hemisphere. He's got a similar near abroad philosophy about the former, states of the Soviet Union and the near abroad to Russia and his security interests. So this could have been prevented, and Trump did prevent it. Trump didn't start one war. Biden's in office, and within a year, we're looking at something that's pretty close to a chance to get into some kind of World War III.
Well, you know what? I don't believe we can afford to have a weak president. Some people think that's okay, but if you got a weak president, you're going to be pushed around. If you're the weak kid on the block, the bully's going to take your candy and your lunch money and probably knock you in the nose too, just for laughs and giggles. We're not in a good spot here. Putin bad, but I think, we don't have anything to brag about with that administration in the White House right now. And a lot of the Congress critters and people running a lot of our big agencies. Would you take issue with what I said?
The people that are leading the House and the Senate are not great. They're weak. They're weak on America. They don't believe in America first. Trump did. I do. I think most Americans do. They expect their leaders and their elected officials to put them first.
Amen. Amen. Well, it's globalism first. It's they want everything down with America, globalism first, and that's why they want more things going to NATO and other big international organizations. And of course, then there's that club of Klaus, if you know what I'm talking about.
World Economic Forum.
Yep, the Schwaber. Try to pick my words carefully on here, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. They got grandiose, nutty ideas, but I don't think Americans are going to have anything to do with it. Maybe they'd like to see us squashed by Russia. Maybe they wouldn't like to see us get into it with Russia, just because they know that we're too hard-headed to go along with their stupid plans. What do you think?
I think they're very dangerous. Behind the scenes, there are things going on in our country today most people probably aren't aware of. You know who General Flynn is and was.
Oh, yeah.
It was last summer that Chase Manhattan Bank sent him a note and said, "We're canceling your credit card. You're a reputational risk to Chase Manhattan Bank." The reason they did that was the Attorney General of the state of New York was getting after the financial institutions that are headquartered in New York, saying, these conservatives and these kind of people damage your reputation. If you don't reflect that in your quarterly and annual financial statements, you're subject to, action by the government because you're not fairly representing the risk of investing in Chase Manhattan Bank. And so these liberals are going after the ability of conservatives, your ability to monetize what you're doing, to debank them, to make it difficult to raise capital. They do it to the petrochemical companies already. They've got a thing called ESG, and it's a financial investing strategy of environment, social justice, and governance. And they will look at the petrochemical companies and say, well, you're just not good for the environment. We're not going to recommend that the mutual funds, BlackRock, Vanguard, so forth, invest in you, and you won't be able to raise capital. And so here we are trying to get energy, and yet these big petrochemical companies are being starved for capital. They're doing it to small business, in your world on YouTube. They did it to General Flynn. They're going to go after almost any platform the conservatives form in social media or to communicate with the public to do it. That's all sort of along the same lines of Klaus Schwab and their effort to, use energy and preventing global warming to assert sort of this one world governance approach where you're going to own nothing and you're going to be happy. You're going to be a serf for these geniuses that have managed to accumulate a lot of money and know best.
Exactly. Neo-feudalism is what it's all about. Right now, people can climb from the bottom to the top, but they're kicking the ladders out. They don't want us to be able to do that anymore. So I'm glad you see that. You're on top of it. I talk about that on my channel a lot of times. And, they don't have any love for this document. No.
And they're after, the three things that help make us free. There's a fourth that, is guns, but cash, cars, and communications.
Yeah, they're after all those. That's what a lot of people don't ask. And let's talk about the cash side. They want to create this thing called a central bank digital currency.
Right.
Which all your money would be digital dollars. You would have to have some electronic form to transact it. It would not be a blockchain. It would be programmable money that the government
could change the value of.
Right, and they'd have a string on it the whole time. So if you didn't have a good social credit score, if you were General Flynn or anybody that's not sucking up to whatever they think is important, I bet they could keep you from spending them. They could jerk them away from you or embargo them, just like they're doing with Russian dollars right now. They could.
Or your bank, can see that you've given to conservatives running for office. And your bank says, well, that creates reputational risk because everybody now knows, a good number of our clients are conservatives given to conservatives and we don't like them. And so we're going to debank you. There's no end of mischief. And the government doesn't need to know where I'm spending my money and how I'm spending my money.
Well,
and of course, their answer is, if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you care? It's like, I care because it's none of their business. And tomorrow they may declare
their definition of wrong is not anything to do with right and wrong as most people see it. It's a whole different matter. For example, they're saying that this money is going to be linked to climate change and social equity. which
right.
means giving, taking your money and giving it to somebody else. That's
Right.
what social equity is. It's
Right.
taking the money you work hard for and give it to somebody sitting on their couch.
Right.
That's
This is liberals. This is Democrats. I think Lincoln said, about slavery. Democrats, it's about thievery. You work, I eat. They've never changed.
So we got a lot on our plates to deal with, and as a person running for Congress, you'll have your work cut out going up. How are you going to keep them from corrupting you? It seems like almost everybody that goes up there gets corrupted. You're sounding good right now. How are you going to maintain your integrity when you get in that nasty swamp?
Well, I mean, some of it is you remember where you came from, right? I'm a West Point graduate. It says right on the ring, duty, honor, country.
Fantastic.
And I wear it on my ring finger, where the wedding band goes. It means a lot to me. You remember, the people that sent you, and then you make sure you bring good people with you that help you stay grounded, and you make sure that they tell you when you're like screwing up, and you don't fall prey to, Hollywood for ugly people. People go up there and they get enamored by the power and they get enamored by the parties and the meetings, and the first thing you do is you don't buy property there. If you buy property in Washington, you're part of the swamp.
Oh, yeah.
And then, then you hang with a good group of congressmen. And my plan is to hang with the Freedom Caucus. Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows had been a member, before he was Trump's chief of staff. I mean, these are conservative people that love their country. Trump doesn't need to be president. He could have done a million other things. And he's had no end of grief for his willingness to serve. But, he's grounded. He loves America in terms of what matters most. He wants it for his family. And so those are the things I think you do. And then of course, you do a little praying and stuff like that.
Yeah, we need a lot of praying right now. There's no doubt about that. Our country needs a lot of that. So what are the changes that you would try to instigate? What is your top agenda if you get into DC?
It's not real complex. The federal government's too big. It's too big for anybody to manage. And so they've turned over managing the federal government to the permanent state, the bureaucracy. So they write very generalized laws and they let the bureaucracy write the regulation and implements it, and that becomes law. And there's just too much. So get rid of the things we added last. Department of Homeland Security, I think that's a disaster. It was poorly conceived. It's a mishmash of things that don't go together. And it's a threat to mostly us, near as I can tell. ATF, they're a threat to mostly us. I think the states could regulate the vast majority of what they do and let that be handled at the state level. Department of Education, I was a school superintendent. They did nothing for me. They give you 10 cents and they act like it's all the whole dollar you got. And so every time they come up with a new idea, they'll tell you, hey, you got to do what we're telling you to do, or we're going to take the 10 cents away. And then you got to sue us to get it back. Transgenders, they did it with that. My school system was under a desegregation order since 1970. They did it with that. Obama and his school lunch program, right, where Michelle cooked up what the kids were supposed to eat, they threw it all away. It tasted terrible. You can't give a kid skim milk in school and they go home and drink whole milk, and you think they're going to drink skim milk tomorrow in school. I mean, it's ridiculous. They throw it away. And so if you didn't do what they wanted, they'd take the money. They'll keep the damn money, or never take it from us to begin with, and we get rid of you. Goodbye, Department of Education, Department of Justice, the National Security Division, the Civil Rights Division. They need a close look. The Civil Rights Division is a major problem, I believe. They've lost their way. The good work they were supposed to do, they're now not doing anymore. And they're now a weapon used against state and local authorities to reach national level objectives with regard to multifamily housing, to the way police departments operate, to the way schools operate. We have 50 states in a federal system. We don't need the federal government to make them all the same. The states are different and people want them to be different. If you don't like your state, move somewhere else.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for that.
The National Security Division, I don't need them involved with school boards. They need to be brought under control. The FBI, there's clearly something wrong with the FBI. Too many problems, too many people involved in mischief at the FBI. And just I think it was yesterday, I was reading about a new report the Inspector General did over there, that Christopher Wray has to confess to, with hundreds of major violations of FBI protocol and protections of Americans' liberties. The Patriot Act, it's got to go. It's
amen. Thank you. I was going to ask you about that. Good.
You know, and it's the creatures it created, the FISA courts, clearly don't work right. There's no consequences for any of these agencies that lied to the FISA courts about what, you know, they said Trump was up to and what was going on with Russiagate and all that nonsense. You know, that would be a start. And then the debt limit. Don't raise the debt limit again. It's your credit card limit. If you can't live with it, get rid of something.
Get rid of something. I like that. We're starting to see. You named a few candidates we could get rid of. Let's see, ATF, Department of Education. How about the Department of Just Us? You know,
well, they need to be reined in a lot.
Yeah, they need to be reined in.
Homeland Security,
Homeland Security,
Export-Import Bank. I mean, there's a lot of things we've collected over the years that may have served a purpose at one point, but we don't need them anymore, and they cost too much and they do too little.
So that's one of the problems. Anytime you create an agency, a department, or a project, when it does its job, it don't stop. It just keeps growing. You know, you create something, you got this little thing you want done. You create an agency or a department or something to do that. Once they get the job done, they come up with other excuses to continue to exist. Right. They're like a cancer. They metastasize. That's what government does. That's why that's what the deep state is. It's a cancer. It's metastasized within the body public of the United States, and it's eating us alive. It's not productive. It exists for its own continuing existence, and as it grows, it's going to choke us and kill us. It's too much.
You know, the transportation.
Amen.
Right. Biden did the Build Back Better budget back before Christmas of $1.5 trillion, and they had a chance to put in there, you know, that you had to use union labor, and they didn't. He waited till after that bill was passed, and then he came out with an executive order that basically says, if you're going to build under this act, you have to have a union participation and go by their rules. Well, Alabama doesn't have unions. And yet now our companies down here that build things are going to have to go find a union to partner with in order to get the opportunity to compete and be part of the Build Back Better programs. That's just spreading liberal agendas to the red states. We don't need that kind of help.
That's what they want to do. And they also want to spread liberal people in their states. And that's why they take other people and bus them into our states and fly them in, if you know what I'm talking about. So it makes me wonder why so many states want to be part of this union, or why we want to keep certain other ones in. I wouldn't mind kicking a few out myself. We filed divorce instead of us leaving, maybe we kick a few of them out. Anyway, that's a little different take on it. You're goodbye. We don't want you anymore. You know,
I think maybe some of them, if you could do it, California ought to be 3 states.
Well, yeah,
LA, San Francisco, and the rest of it, which is very conservative.
We got to watch House divided, because, you know, that idea started on the conservative side of the House because a lot of the people didn't want to be dominated by the cities, because the farmers and rural people in California are being crushed out of existence, having to deal with all the mandates and regulations and fees that
taxes
on them, taxes. Yep. Yeah. And what they would like to do is separate from those cities that dominate. But then the liberals heard this idea, and they go, oh, yeah, we should do this. But they wanted to divide the state where every section had a major city in it, so they'd still be dominated. Then you have 3 states voting instead of having 2 liberal senators and 2 conservative senators. Then you would have 6 liberal senators. They like that idea. So, you know, we got to watch that.
Right.
And if they finally get away with putting Washington, D.C. in and making interstate, or Puerto Rico, then we ought to come out and divide Illinois into 2 states, or some of these other city-dominated states where people want to get away.
D.C. ought to have a commissioner again. I don't know why they need a mayor. Put them back under Congress, under a commissioner, you know, that's confirmed by Congress, and forget the fiction that it's actually a real city.
There you go. There you go. So what we get with you as a candidate is you're a patriot. You are against the Patriot Act. You believe in the every amendment in the Constitution fully, and you understand. Now, on my channel, we use code words like nug. You're not afraid to hug your nug, and you probably do like keep your nugs well fed with some nice kiblets. And so that's great. And you've got the military experience, being an assistant secretary of the Army. That's pretty awesome. So where do you think this is going with Ukraine? Let's kind of get back with that. What do you think is our chances that we're going to be in World War III? What can we do as citizens? If there's anything that we can do to throw water on the fire to calm it down so it don't happen.
So certainly, speak up to your congressmen and senators, right? There's a clear line between sending aid to Ukraine and sending soldiers. We don't need to get beyond aid. That would be my view. The next part, get out to the polls and vote for conservative candidates in the primaries. In the general election, vote those people into office in November, and then hold their feet to the fire. I'm sick of looking at these Republicans. I was just doing a prep for a TV commercial we're going to run. And I said, I sound like Trey Gowdy. I don't like this commercial. And so this guy did nothing but talk for 2 years. And now he's on TV talking again, but he didn't do anything. We don't need any more of those kind of conservative Republicans, that don't actually do anything. So hold their feet to the fire when they get to Congress. We're going to have about 2 years that Americans are going to give us to do something. And it ought to be substantive. I think Biden and his lousy son have probably broken the law. We need to get into that laptop and find out what's real. And if the things we think are real, then people ought to be impeached. But I'm not a guy just going to run around saying, let's impeach Biden with no evidence and no point, and we waste a lot of time. Let's impeach him when we've got the right evidence, and let's really do it. But let's do real things for Americans.
That's one area where our community hurts itself. It falls into a lot of storylines and runs with it before it gets the evidence behind it. And I think we've got to do better homework before we do that. It's not out there. It's just you got to find it, because if we don't, we get crucified for it. And on their side, they think they can say anything they want to. They make up lies all day and run with them, paint them as truth, and because they own the deep state and the media.
Hollywood. They own academia. They own Hollywood. They own the media.
They own social media. If you say anything different, they'll tap it down. But it's something we got to watch out for. We got to be real careful and back up and find the goods on any case we make. I do beg to differ with some people on the biolab story. I'm not saying it's not that, but I'm saying, there are biolabs out there. We know that, but what we don't have, in my opinion, what I'm not seeing, and I have spent quite a few hours looking, is direct proof that they got gain of function research going on in them. A lot of people believe that, and they might, but we haven't proven that. So we don't need to be running around stating it as a fact until we can dig up the goods on it. And if we can, we need to stop that kind of stuff. It shouldn't. Right. I mean, it's not something Russia's going to do just in Ukraine. If we're funding that, we need to stop it on our end. We need to raise Cain about it. But I've not seen anything that substantiates that at this point. I've seen, there's some biolabs out there, yeah, and they got started originally for a legitimate purpose, like I was talking earlier. It was to take weapons that were existent in some of these countries and to remediate them.
Right.
Weapons remediation program. Once you got the weapons remediated, they go, well, we're a government agency, we got people, we got budget. Let's do some research for cattle, make sure they don't get hoof and mouth disease, anthrax, or whatever, and people. And so they keep going. Did they go too far? Did they go beyond that? I don't have the evidence to say. But even in that line of research, it's possible that they had, biological organisms like anthrax and hoof and mouth disease or something they shouldn't have had. Maybe even Ebola. We know that there are labs that did a gain of function research and weapon, basically made a human transmissible bird flu in the Netherlands and Indonesia, of all places. That should not have been allowed either. I think that kind of stuff needs to stop. And besides, if we are behind bioweapons, that's illegal by treaties that we signed off to. So anybody finding exposing that stuff, raise Cain, something's got to be done. But we can't raise Cain about something that we don't have the evidence for. What do you think about all that?
No, I think the evidence is important. Otherwise, you get people worked up, and then it's a nothing burger.
Bingo, exactly, nothing burger. And we look stupid when we're carrying around a pack of nothing burgers. A lot of people do. Now, people will get mad at me for having just said all that. But hey, I'm saying, just show me the evidence. Let's be fact-based and let's get the evidence. That's all I'm saying. Let's have the evidence. And we don't have that right yet. Not that I've seen. If you've seen something otherwise, you let me know. I'm looking because I've had people send me a zillion images. What's here? It's here. It's here. And I looked at it. Well, no, it don't say the gain of function. Except maybe I got an article that was from a state-owned magazine and from the People's Republic of China. Of course, they're going to say that. I mean, yeah, because they've been doing it, and now they want to. They're trying to escape the blame and point somewhere else. But anyway, I'm going to show. I got a link that kind of comports of what we've been talking about. I'm going to hit a share screen here. I've started an organization. You might know Mike Siebert. He's in it with me. Anyway, this is a Freedom Restoration Foundation. And we're kind of in favor of a lot of things. Now, one thing that we care about is our power grid. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. You can see the kind of legislation. We got various activity alerts we post in here, things for people to do, how to do it, summary of bills. Now, some of this has got to be updated, or I just got a guy to re-update this website. I set it up, but I don't have time to maintain it. You can see some of the things that are important to us, but that's not the only things, of course, but that's just the whole proposition of this organization, and it's a nationwide organization. We're still small and young, but we believe that our freedoms don't need to be preserved, but restored. We feel like too many have been taken from us already. And let's see, my cursor's going wild on me. And we've got this place called Action Center on this website. Now, this is what you might like. This Action Center, of course, repeats those, but it tells people they can make their voices count. It tells them where to go. A couple places where they actually track bills into Congress, how you can track bills in the state, how to find your state legislators, how to find who, like you're about to be, we hope, who your member of the House of Representatives is. And here's the Capitol switchboard. Press 1 for Senate and 2 for the House, right? And that's the number for the Capitol switchboard. Finding who your senator is, and it talks about emailing. And of course, you got 2 senators. Calling, writing, what to write, what to say on the telephone. And it's basically how to go about addressing these people. And then here's a resource recap of all the websites and phone numbers and things here. So we're showing people how to make these contacts. We've even and this has got to be updated too. We've got a resources page on here, which we've actually went through for a couple types of legislation. And here was a snapshot of a point in time of all the legislation that was actually in the House, talking about the which House it was in, the House or Senate, the bill number, bill name, a summary of the bill, who introduced it, the status of it, and who the sponsors are, and whether we oppose or support it. And I think the key thing, if you want to stop bad legislation, is to stop it in the subcommittee. And it really helps you form your strategy when you know who the sponsors are. You might have suddenly guessed I might know a little bit about this. I set this stuff up to try to form an. I haven't seen many organizations that had effective information on their websites for how to actually tackle these things in Congress. So what that came from is I was chairman of the policy committee of the National Space Society for 10 years. And we had websites, we had a phone tree, we had, we sent people from the grassroots to the Hill, 100 people at a time running the halls of Congress. And we've had a major impact on space legislation. That's what I was doing up to 2010 when I switched gears and become more of a gardener prepper kind of guy. But so I've got a lot of background in space. This is, you see my stuff here.
I see your badge on your hat there.
Yeah, you know what that is?
Space Force?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Space Force. So I'm definitely a space guy who happens to be a worm farmer and a prepper and a few things like that. So
well, I've got a proposal. As a candidate, you do that. But we need a Space Force Academy, and it needs to be in Huntsville. They're doing it through the Air Force Academy, but if the Air Force had love for space, we wouldn't have a Space Force. And so the United States had to create Space Force to take care of the big gaps that were emerging in space and defending our opportunities up there. And to get that culture and identity in place for the Space Force to succeed, I believe they need the foundation, which is an academy and a professional education system.
Well, if we evoke Dr. Lowell Wood's brilliant Pepples concept, we could have quite a defensive force in space to stop missiles. And we can intercept them a whole lot closer to their point of origin than our ground-based missiles. And I've worked on ground-based missiles. I've worked at Strategic Defense Command. That's my calendar back there when I was working back in 1988. So I worked for the Army's portion of the Star Wars program. And the guy in charge of it at the time was Ambassador Hank Cooper. And I've interviewed him on this channel, by the way. So another thing I worry about is our power grid. Our power grid is extremely vulnerable right now. The government's not really done much about it. And we've been fought by the industry lobbyists all along the way. Now, for the people that don't know, there's a street in Washington, D.C. called K Street. And it's the one with the big row of tall buildings all the way down it. And it's nothing but lobbyists. And all those guys usually write the legislation for the congressman. And they walk in there and hand it to them. So here's the legislation. You just take this and put it through and it'll work. And they're very much involved in writing it and editing it, and modifying it, combining it. They're in, I've run these halls of Congress, and what my experience is, those guys are in there like fleas on the dog's back, maybe worse. There's a lot of lobbyists, industry lobbyists walking up and down those halls. There are very few grassroots organizations like what we did. And that's what we're doing with this Freedom Restoration Foundation. We're taking the grassroots back up. That's what we're trying to do. So this is a real threat to us, I think, having such a influence like that. What do you see about doing about that?
Well, you would have expected if the government was awake to the problem, there'd been money in the $1.5 trillion that Biden got appropriated last fall. It's part of our infrastructure. They got money in there for railroad crossings, crossing gates at railroads. I think the actual funding for government property was somewhere in the area of 200 billion out of the 1.5 trillion or 1.25 trillion. The rest of it was things that were really like private property, railroads, subways. I mean, a lot of these things, if it was worth doing, you'd wonder why the railroad wouldn't do it. But the power grid is important, and we got to protect it.
Funding friends of Biden. Well, we could pretty much harden the power grid, at least the big transformers, by putting ground blockers on the center tap of the ground of these big transformers. We could do that for the cost of one B-1 bomber of about $2 trillion. 2 billion. And, for everything it takes to harden the power grid, it would be less than the money that the power industry has already taken from their consumers from rate fees and hired lobbyists to go fight us against. So more money has been put into the pockets of lobbyists on K Street from your utility fees that you people pay than would take to give you real safety in hardening our grid. The power grids are a linchpin. Well, if it goes down, everything else goes down. All the other critical infrastructures, every one of them requires electrical power. We are so dependent on it. You wouldn't believe it today. And another thing I worry about is our spent fuel rods at the power plants. We need to get those out away. A lot of them need to be dry cast. Of course, some of them are still too hot to dry cast, but they need a safe disposal site. And then we need to make sure, or they need to be reprocessed. And I think reprocessing is a big thing. But we got to make sure that there's some means to maintain cooling water at these power plants. If the whole nation goes down, the idea that the backup generators will work is only good for a few days because there's not going to be any way to pump fuel to run the trucks to get them there. And if there was, vigilantes would be taking the trucks out because they'd want the fuel, like the movie Mad Max. So they'd have to have military escorts, and we may have that as a stopgap. But then the families driving it, to the truck drivers and the military escorters would need to be secured. The guys taking care of that function would be home taking care of mom and dad and the kids. So there's a lot of stuff to be done there. What do you think about this? All these steps like that for getting a grid hard?
Oh yeah, it's prudent. It should have already been done in the last infrastructure bill.
Amen. It could have been done. They keep ignoring this stuff on purpose. Right. We're being fought by NERC and FERC and EFRI, all these other agencies out there, and the power companies. So yeah, it'd be good to have a person like you up there who understands these things, who we can call and say, "Hey, Casey, we got an issue here. Can you help us?" So I'm 100% behind you. I really like what you're doing, what you're saying. And what would you like to say for the preppers? Right now, my opinion is the people not prepping, they just haven't woke up. They're at risk. Right. I think prepping is essential right now. What would you like to say to the preppers out there in the cyberspace?
I sent a note to my family members and stuff when Russia invaded Ukraine. Make sure you got good tires on your car. Make sure you got your pantry stocked with things that are going to last a long time. Make sure you got your water barrel filled. The basics, right? Because on no notice, we're going to see things we have not seen before. It won't be standard things people have seen on movies. It'll either be EMP or cyber or some attack on the space grid that'll, disable financial institutions, ATMs, have some cash, have a way, to buy stuff, have weapons to protect yourself and your family, and know who your friends are, and have a way to get to family, friends, and probably some radios, some basic stuff, right? So that'd be that. In terms of the campaign, folks that want to learn more, they could go to friendsofkc.com, see the whole agenda. But to me, this is the most important election. I wouldn't be running if I didn't feel this way, that we probably faced in a good long time, maybe over 100 years. The country's teetering, and this next election is going to be really, really important. There are so many things happening behind the scenes with big corporations, big tech, big media, and government working in unison to strip us of our rights, strip us of our freedom, whether it's the banking systems, automotives. The new Biden in January, his National Highway Transportation Safety Board said in the next 4 years, cars must get 25% more efficient on gasoline. I mean, they're trying to price gasoline-driven cars out of the market and force us into electric cars. They've got a deal now, a pilot, where you'll have a device in your car that'll say where you went, how you went, when you went, what the car specs were that you went in.
No, they want to auto kill switch in it too, so they can turn it off.
That's right. And
that's all my freedom. Probably lock the doors so they can come pick you up.
Right. I mean, that's too much information for the government. And their excuses, well, the gas tax doesn't pay enough to maintain the roads anymore, so we're going to charge you by where you went, when you went, how you went, all that. But the next pandemic, they could easily turn that into, you can't go. The only places you can go are these places, and if you don't go there, we'll turn your car off with the kill switch. I mean, I don't need a government like that. And so
we're taking too much taxes already. And,
right.
In so many states, they tell people, oh, we got to have taxes to build schools. We got to increase the property tax so we can build it. You hear that everywhere. They like to come down here and they try to pass those kind of laws too.
Right.
People down here say no, but walk around Huntsville or anywhere here in North Alabama, anywhere I go, and do you see any old schools? There's new schools popping up everywhere. What do you
right.
There's new schools everywhere around here.
When I was superintendent, I built $208 million in new schools. They all have tornado shelters and stuff. But frankly, I watched the schools shut down during COVID. And the kids that were in public school, they're never going to recover if they were in second or third grade. There's no plan for them to learn how to read if they're beyond second grade. So I'm actually for school. The money follows the child. I don't even say school choice, because if you tell public schools school choice, they'll be like, oh, you can have that public school or that public school. That's your choices. So I'm for the money follows the kid. If the schools don't perform, they go out of business.
There you go.
And something that works comes online for kids, because they're going to get one shot in education. And it's like so much of our government, it just does not work right anymore for Americans. It works for itself.
We're failing our kids. And, but we don't need more tax money to go into a system like that. And it's already, they've got enough. But they always come around begging, and all they ever do with it is waste it. And for those states where you're paying, look, Alabama's got the lowest property tax in the union. Right. We got new buildings everywhere. So,
well, if you live in Madison City, you're seeing your real estate taxes go up, right?
Yeah.
And when I was superintendent here in Huntsville, city fathers came to me and said, hey, we want to raise the sales tax. If you support it, we'll give half to you. And I said, no, I'm okay. If we keep taxes low, people will come, business will come, and the rising tide will raise all boats. We need to learn how to live with what we got.
Amen. Thank you for that. So it's not a problem that we need to quit raising the debt still. We need to quit blowing debt. And we're blowing it on stupid stuff. Like you said, all that transportation bill really went to the friends of the administration. And that's what has happened in the past too. And didn't do anything that was productive in a true sense, for at least for what was being spent on it. There's some token projects out there, highway projects, but they could have done those anyway. I think it's an atrocity. And, anyway, you got a final word you'd like to say? We've already passed the 1 hour, or close to the 1 hour mark now.
Okay. Well, hey, I really appreciate being able to share this with your audience and chat with you tonight. This is a super important election. The primary is on May 24th. This is a Republican district. The individual going to Washington will call themselves a Republican. The question is, are they really a conservative? And do they subscribe to the views, your listeners have? So on the 24th, please show up. We got plenty of ads on TV. We got plenty on radio to learn more. Website, friendsofcasey.com. And vote first for America.
So I take it you're not going to be calling Mitch McConnell up to ask him what you should do, right?
No, he needs to go home too. Yeah, Romney needs to go home. McConnell needs to go home. A lot of those guys, their voters need to send them home.
Amen. Well, I appreciate that. So this is the chance, guys, that where we can make a difference. We got to find good candidates who believe like we do and not like the globalists who think like the people, who will support the people. And there's prospects all across this nation. This is just the one that's local, but I'm fortunate that he's also been Assistant Secretary of the Army and is able to talk and is already interested in prepper topics. He came to our prepper meeting. He's interested in the future of our country. He's interested in quite aware of what's going on with Ukraine and how we're on the verge of stepping in something we don't need to step into, something that could take us all out. So I appreciate it. Real patriot. Colonel Wardynski, I really appreciate what you represent, what you bring to the table here. And so you got me behind you. And with that, I want to say to my watchers here, I thank you all for watching. And please come back. In fact, I'm planning to have a guy who's running for governor in the state of New Mexico tomorrow. So that should be very interesting. That's more of what what's being done right now. So everybody, thank you for watching. Stay tuned. And I'll go live tomorrow night with our normal little chat session. So take care, everyone, and good night.